always wanted to call a professor a boykie, but today I get that opportunity because joining me today is a professor of practice at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Stephen Sidley, Stephen Boykie Sidley.
Thank you. Just to make that accurate, I'm at the Johannesburg Business School, which is the Graduate School of Management at the University of Johannesburg.
That does sound much grander than what I did. Where does a boykie come from? I've been dying to ask you.
Okay, so the boykie obviously is a nickname. I was born to an American mother in Johannesburg, and when I was born, I had an Afrikaans nurse, and she picked me up at 2 minutes old and said, "Boykie, dis a boykie," and my mother was very charmed by this, and it's stuck with me since then.
Okay, well. Welcome to the State of the Nation. Now, we're going to do something we haven't done before on the State of the Nation, but we have had a number of economists and a number of analysts and so on, and we've never discussed the topic of crypto. Now, crypto is a topic that you have not just looked at, you have written the book.
2, yes.
And one of them is right there, and you can show us
it to
what
the
this
camera
looks like.
over there. This is the current book, came out in August, both here and globally.
Right. So you are... to put it mildly, a fan of the instrument of cryptocurrency.
I'm an enthusiast, which is not quite a fan.
Right.
There are aspects of the industry which, as we all know, have a darker side. It has been an attractor of scamsters and hucksters and crooks. And some of them have gotten away with it. It is complicated, jargon-laced, scary, and has been a rough ride as a consequence of that. But if you move up above the forest, it is simply a better way to own and transfer value than in our current system. And so I am a hard and fast and immutable believer that the grander world of crypto, and I need to qualify that for a second, Mike, when most people hear the word crypto, they think Bitcoin. Yes. They think cryptocurrency. Crypto is a much, much broader field than that. Cryptocurrency just happened to be the first thing. It was 2009 with Satoshi and the paper that caused the Bitcoin program. But crypto today stretches across a wide swath of industries and has very different incarnations. There is cryptocurrency, there is NFTs, and I'm not talking about the digital art at absurd prices. There is metaverse, there is Web3, there is decentralized autonomous organization, there is the tokenization of real-world assets. There's a huge spread of this stuff happening.
And just like that, everybody's eyes are glazing over that's
Yes.
watching us, right?
Yes.
And let's just start with the first thing you mentioned, that part of the problem with the world of crypto is it's been a haven for hucksters, charlatans, etc. Let's first deal with those.
Right. So let me talk about that for a moment. Best known of them, of course, is Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX. And one more recent one, which is a gentleman by the name of CZ and Binance. But in truth, the figure that is given by the FBI and 2 of the top crypto forensic companies in the world, one is called Chain Analysis, one's called Elliptic, is that 0.15% of all transactions on the blockchain are illicit. In comparison, within the real world that we live in, dollars and cents and rands and cents, the figure is 5%. The reason why crypto gets all the headlines and the traditional financial criminal world doesn't is that world, the traditional criminal world, happens in darkness. It happens with crooked employees, crooked lawyers, crooked banks, huge amount of states, huge amount of capital being moved under the cover of darkness illicitly. Whereas the whole point of cryptocurrency is that it's on a public chain. Everybody can see it. So when a crime gets committed, you immediately see it on the blockchain, those people who are looking. And as a result, it's gotten all the headlines, whereas the stuff that is really bad is uncovered still as yet. We know this from the Panama Papers, that bank in Panama that got raided and all that stuff was found. You can't see most of the stuff that goes on in that world.
Yeah, and a lot of people would want to keep it that way, wouldn't they?
Yes, they very much would.
Now, explain to me how the blockchain is going to tell you that I've made my money out of, child porn or human trafficking or just straightforward gangsterism.
It doesn't, because the blockchain, the amount of money that moves on one of these blockchains or one of these crypto tokens is public, but the owner of the account is anonymous. And so there has been skullduggery, ranging from terrorism to porn to just deceit and stealing of things on these blockchains. And they have been done anonymously, even though you can see the money moving illicitly. But as a reaction to that, the FBI and the NSA and Channel Analysis and the Scotland Yard have grown very clever techniques to cross-reference all these things in order to trace the money. It's very easy to trace the money. Once you can trace the money in a blockchain, you can start tracing it back. So I'll give you a very current example, which is the funding of terrorists, particularly the funding of terrorist organizations in the Middle East, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad. Hamas has now said publicly, please don't send us any cryptocurrency. Because what has happened is that money is being tracked by American and Western organizations, and it's being tracked back to the donors. So you stand the risk of unmasking your donors if you're a terrorist. And they say, if you want to send us money, we have other means. And of course, what they're talking about is rogue states like Iran, etc. If you want to be a criminal, the blockchain is a very poor idea because it's easy to trace that money.
One of the advantages of crypto is the universality of it all.
That's right.
The fact of the matter is I have an account, I've got a bank account, and all I need is my password, which I keep in my head. And if I put the equivalent of R1 million in there or $1 million, it doesn't matter. I'm buying X amount of crypto, and I can then hop on a plane and the same amount of money is waiting for me at the other end. There's no exchange controls, there's no regulation. And that's a good and a bad thing, isn't it?
You've said it, you've hit the nail on the head. It's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing for you and I, who would like to get, I'll give you a trivial example. You've got a child studying overseas who's going away for a weekend with her friends, and she phones you and says, Dad, I need 300 euros to go camping in the hills of France. And if you have to do a traditional transaction, forex transaction from a bank, you find that you've got to pay fees, not only fees to your bank, but fees to the South African Reserve Bank to do the forex transaction. It takes 3 days and what. It's a painful process. We've all gone through it. So in this way, if she has a cryptocurrency account over there, you just send her 300 euros. Nobody sees it besides you and your child. And I've done this myself. So for the consumer, this is enormously convincing. For the nation state, it is a terrifying prospect. Because nation states all live within their own currencies. There are 1 or 2 countries in the world who are locked to the dollar, but in general, every single nation state has its own currency, their own budgets, their own borders, their own way of policing their own economy. If there is only one currency worldwide, they lose an enormous amount of power, particularly to entrench interests like the government. And so there is this huge fight going on in the world right now between governments who want to control your money and have traditionally controlled your money, and individual citizens who don't want government to control their money. And that tension has suddenly burst into the open with crypto, and it's an ongoing fight. And it seems now, particularly this year, that the crypto side of the equation, the citizens who want to control their own money, are gaining a winning hand in public perception, particularly as the crime of the past 2 years in crypto starts to recede. That's a cleaning of the gene pool. We're getting rid of all those bad people. And so you're finding legislation that is now settling all over the world, and the most progressive states, with respect to Switzerland, Dubai, Portugal, Singapore, are allowing citizens to control their own money and not trying to surveil it in the way that they have in the past.
Now, that's a good and a bad thing, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, well, great, the government doesn't have a look into my own finances. But it also means that when Sam Bankman-Fried steals my money, I can't then let out that, what are they going to do about it, yell that I would do if somebody stole my rands or my dollars or my euros.
Yes, that's exactly right. But there's even a worse problem. If your government steals your money, forget about the criminal. And when I say steal, I put quote marks around steal. How do they steal your money? Well, in the United States, 2/3 of all dollars in existence were printed in the past 3 years. And so you have inflation. Turkey, 80% inflation, Argentina, 75% inflation. We don't even talk about Zimbabwe, Venezuela, 95% inflation. That's basically the government has stolen the value of your money through mismanagement of the economy.
Yeah.
Who do you get to complain to in those cases? You don't complain to the government because they're the cause of it. Had your money been in some stable cryptocurrency, you would have not only kept the value of the money, but it would have risen in relation to your own money. I'll give you an example of this. 35% of Nigerians keep their money in stable coins. Stable coin is a cryptocurrency that is locked to $1. And so they get their paychecks, 34% of workers over there, and they take out just enough to buy their consumables, food and milk, etc., kids' school fees, and they put the rest in stable coins. And they retain the value of their money while the rest of the population is losing value at, I think the current inflation rate is about 30% in Nigeria.
Now, you can't have it both ways. You mentioned that example.
Yeah.
And then you say they put it in stable coin, which is linked to the dollar. But your first slur was against the dollar.
Yes, I know. The dollar tends to have been the one that's been the most stable up until very recently. Well, people are now scratching their heads and saying, is this really the one place I want to keep my... Is this really a bastion of stability that it used to be? The answer to that is probably yes, more so than in other places. But the dollar and the American economy has taken a very serious knock over the past year. There is a lot of fear in the air. Today, the day that we're speaking, Mike, we've had this absolute stratospheric rise in gold and in cryptocurrencies, particularly Bitcoin. And it is a response to basically the cliff of debt, which is hanging right in front of the United States government, as well as the Japanese government and very many other governments. And there's sort of the smell of fear is in the air. So right now people are saying, are any fiat currency stable anymore? But correct, the dollar's been the one that most people have put their crypto into.
But now, this idea of the crypto enthusiasts maligning debt, it's debt that got us as prosperous as what we are.
Oh, absolutely.
So it is releasing the cap on the finite financial resources that has created global wealth since the Second World War.
I'll go even further than that, and then I'll tell you where I malign debt.
Right.
The mechanism of debt, the mechanism of borrowing against time, is the fuel that caused civilization to grow. Without debt, civilization would not have grown. It was a bet, starting 6,000 years ago, as far as we know. It was a bet on the future of humanity, and it has worked fantastically well. Where it has failed is where the debt has gotten to a ratio against servicing that debt, which has become unpayable, which it has become in many countries. We did some research on this debt issue, Mike, and every single civilization that has gone bankrupt for the past 6,000 years has gone bankrupt because it printed too money, all the way from salting gold coins with silver in the Roman Empire, all the way through. Uncontrolled spend, which results in uncontrolled printing of money and uncontrolled debt, is the bad side of debt. The good side of debt is the conservative, prudent, when you can service it over time, as all banks know.
Do we not run the risk then of throwing the baby out with the bathwater? And that is to say, I'm always concerned when people sort of use Argentina and America in the same sentence.
They're not the same, you're right.
They are far from the same. And what we do have is America creating a lot of dollars, but they can service that debt quite comfortably. In fact, the majority of their debtors are American.
Right.
All their debt is in their own currency.
Right.
And it's a powerful force for development. That's not to say that it cannot, that it's not out of hand from time to time.
Yeah, if I came off as sounding like America's going down the drain, I want to rewind that. That was not at all what I was implying. It's the most stable, powerful economy on earth. They do have a debt to GDP ratio which is uncomfortable. They have printed an enormous money over the past 2 years. Where the danger lies in the American debt ratio right now is that the bunch of countries that have put their money into American debt, with the Chinese support treasury bills, etc., are now starting to pull back, and that creates a danger for them. Will that danger turn into the collapse of the American economy? Absolutely not. Will there be a de-dollarization where the dollar is not the reserve currency of the world? Absolutely not. I just use an example of America is that they've gotten themselves into some trouble over this, and there is a retreat of capital from the dollar, and much of that today, in the past month, has gone into Bitcoin and gold and various other assets.
Okay, now the concern is that, I suppose the acid test when we talk about the dollar and its continued prominence as the global reserve currency is going to be the day that a president would rather take his bribes in crypto rather than dollars that he puts in his couch, right?
Yes, that's right.
That'll be a defining moment when we do get our politicians who prefer to get crypto into their wallets.
That's right. It would be the great acid test.
It would be a great acid test. But the problem that I have with crypto, and I've never bought a crypto because I just hate the story.
Yeah.
I hate the fable of this clever guy. Nobody really knows who he is. He wrote a paper. You can mine this shit. You can do whatever you like. Instead of this being an open process, there's always got to be a story involved. Right? And it's a fable. At least a country's currency is against the assets and liabilities of the country for the country to work with for good or for bad. But at least it's known. I mean, we all know how badly Zim is working with their currency because those numbers are known.
Yeah.
With crypto, somebody starts Dogecoin as a joke.
That's right.
And now it's worth billions of dollars, and it's a joke. The guy even, let's see just how stupid people are. Well, it turns out they're stupid to the extent of billions of dollars.
So I would push back here, Mike. There is the often used objection against cryptocurrency, which is, it's based on nothing.
Yeah.
It's based on people's perception of how much it's worth, and that statement is entirely true. The answer I have to give that is the question is what is the faith in your local currency based on? The faith in your local currency is based on one thing and one thing only. It is your trust in your government to manage your economy properly.
I wouldn't say so. I would say it's the trust in the numbers, right? I'm saying those numbers are issued. Can a government lie? I suppose they could. It's hard for them to do it because they can't issue a bond and lie about how much bond they issued.
That's right.
So you can make the calculation as to the value of the currency, and we've seen it, and possibly one of the best examples of that has been the South African rand,
right,
which has moved with the performance of the government.
Right.
The numbers are known, and when we did decide to follow a good path back in the mid-2000s,
right,
the currency strengthened on the back of that.
Right. So I don't know whether you're agreeing with me or disagreeing with me, Mike. It still remains that the value of a currency is tied directly to the country's ability to manage its economy properly,
yes,
which they have in the United States for the past, 70, 80, 90 years. And they have in Switzerland and Holland and various other places, and they have not in many other countries. And while you retain a trust in your country to not only manage the economy, but to grow the wealth in that economy, there is no reason for you to move away from your trust in the fiat currency. But those things change over time. Whereas the mathematical algorithm that sits at the heart of Bitcoin or any of the other big ones, Ether is the other big one, does not change over time. There is no ability to print more money.
Yes.
It is capped. And so I would rather put my trust in that than in a government which has all the flaws of being human.
Okay, but now understanding that the only game you're playing is a supply and demand game.
Yes.
You are not playing a value. You're not playing a performative game. You are not playing debt instruments. You are purely playing the bigger fool theory, aren't you?
So is a fiat currency.
Not really, because a country can legitimately, as people that understand the game, I think we could say with high confidence if South Africa was better run, let's put it that way, the country's currency could dramatically improve. And that's happened globally. Those stories aren't as sexy as the ones that collapse.
Yes, but I would paint that narrative differently, Mike. I'd say the bigger fool's game is worse in a country like South Africa, which has continued from the bigger fool theory to vote for this government.
Yeah, and that must be factored into your choice. But what am I choosing when I buy a crypto versus a fiat currency, whichever one it is, right? Yeah, what I'm saying is that I could rush out and buy Zim dollars, but then I would know what I'm getting.
All right. So let me attack this debate we're having from a different lens, and that is the lens is what comprises good money. Okay, so there are a bunch of things. Money needs to be non-counterfeitable. Money needs to be portable. Money needs to be, and there are 4 or 5 of them which tick off the good money profile. It needs to be reproducible, etc. It needs to be divisible so that you can buy cheap things. And both the dollar and Bitcoin tick those marks. The very last and most important one is money has to be scarce. If it's not scarce, it has no value. And there are many, many examples over history where people have made money out of beads or seashells or one of those things, and you can find
gold.
Or gold, find as much as you can. Although gold is scarce because it's difficult to mine, so there's scarcity built into that. The dollar is not. The scarcity is only a promise from your government on the dollar or any other currency. I'm choosing the US probably unfairly. I should be choosing another country. It is not a promise in the world of crypto.
Why do you think it's a promise? Because from the state. Where do they promise this? I'm saying they don't promise anything.
It's an expectation of the citizen that you won't print more money than you should. The government says, of course we won't. We're going to keep you all economically safe.
I don't know where that promise exists. I mean, they're going to print what they print, at least as long as we know what it is, because then we can act accordingly.
Yes, but okay, I'll give you some examples from way back in history, and you can roll them forward from the many, many empires who print what they print in order to invade the next country or build palaces or et cetera, and bankrupt the company. The expectation of the citizen is that you won't be profligate.
Yeah.
The reality of governments is that they sometimes are.
Mm.
And it doesn't exist in this world where there is no ability to be profligate or not in the printing of money, such as in Bitcoin and some of the other ones. From that perspective, for me, it is better money than fiat money because it's not dependent on extraneous conditions like profligacy.
Okay, so some of the attractions of crypto, which there are no doubt are the use of technology, the integration within our lifestyles, right. Everything working in the cloud. I recently had an international trip, and interestingly, only at the airport on the flight back, waiting for my flight home, was the first time I saw a pound note. A £5 note for somebody buying a beer at the airport, right? Up until that moment, I'd spent a couple of weeks there without seeing currency.
Yeah.
Right? Now, one starts to ask, has currency not already gone crypto?
No, currency has gone digital. Very fundamental difference. So your money is still there in bank accounts and ledgers and at Visa, et cetera, et cetera. So no, it's just in digital form.
Right. And now talk to me about tokens, because this is the exciting bit.
Okay, so let me raise up the cover of my book one more time for you, because this book is about everything but cryptocurrency, which we've talked about for a while. And this book has to do with the concept of a non-fungible token, or an NFT, which all of your viewers and listeners would know from the world of this crazy amounts that were paid for bad art, has to do with something that is unprecedented in human history, which is the ability to own something incontrovertibly without the intercession of a third party. Let me explain what that means. You have a title deed to your house if one is lucky enough to own a house. That title deed may sit in your drawer, but the original copy of the title deed, the original, sits with a state institution. Your car registration sits with a state institution. Your computer, if it gets stolen from your house, how do you prove that computer is yours? Well, you phone up the internet connection. You say, I've lost my computer. Can you guys find the receipt for when I bought it 3 years ago? They can't find the receipt. You have no provenance. The money that you think is yours in your bank account is not yours, because if there's a bad employee at the bank, or the bank goes under, or the state decides to take money out, as they did in Cyprus in 2013 and Lebanon recently, it is not your money. It's an IOU to your country. NFTs are a way of having ownership bound to you of anything. I'm not talking about only digital things, but real physical things as well, without having to be attested to by a third party or taken custody of by a third party, which is the world we live in. We will live in the world of title. Now, I'm not talking about a formal title like a house title or a car title, but a receipt or anything that proves, or the attestation of your friends. Yes, this guy has a red jersey, I know him well. With NFTs, with the minting of an NFT which is attached to any item, all that binds you to it is the password that you have to remember. And it represents a philosophical fundamental change. There are 4 eras of ownership in history. The one is that we were in the caves, and you know, this is my rock, and if you touch my rock, I'm going to hit you on the head. And then we moved into a situation where we shared ownership, because if you didn't share the elephant meat, your tribe would get sick and ill, and then you would get beaten up by another tribe. And we moved into command ownerships, in which there was a king or a chief or somebody at the head of the fiefdom. One can argue that North Korea is still that, in which one guy has all the power, or one group of people has all the power, and they enforce it on the others who are all slaves, and they dribble out enough breadcrumbs for them to stay alive. And in about 1600, we started moving into title ownership, where we were given a piece of paper by a third party that says you own this. Way down to your birth certificate, by the way, which is, if anybody's ever lost their birth certificate, they'll know how bad this is. NFTs has the potential of wiping that all out. You don't need attestation, you don't need titles, you just need to remember a password, and the mathematic binds you to it. It's a very exciting, it's a very profound and transformative thought, which is at its very early stages. So let's move into where this is really happening in crypto, where we can see it today, besides the art story. This year, there were 3 huge research reports. Mike, one came from Citicorp, one came from Boston Consulting Group, and the other one from some other august institution, and where they said that the tokenization of assets, and I'll explain that in a moment, will move from a $0 business to a $15 trillion business in 10 years, which will be the fastest movement of capital in human history. And what it is to apply an ownership paradigm, let's say, to this book. And this book is now divided into 15,000 little NFTs. And you can buy a piece of this book if you think, you know, please God, that this book appreciates and wins the Nobel Prize one day or whatever. You can own a tiny piece of something just by remembering a password. There is no attestation at all required. And so what has happened is that all of the major banks, the top 150 banks in the world, I did a recent study on this, all of them are tokenizing their assets in order to be able to sell off a $50 piece of a 500 million rand factory to some retailer who wants to participate. It is an enormous movement, and it's entirely based on this premise that crypto gives you the ability to incontrovertibly own something. You don't need lawyers and vast amounts of paperwork.
And that, of course, will put paid to things like stock exchanges, which is really a tokenization of a company, isn't it?
Yes, stock exchanges has been a paper tokenization and a restricted tokenization. In other words, you've got to be an accredited investor. I had a huge fight with I have a brokerage account at Interactive Brokers overseas. And every year they send you a formula to update your profile. You know, if you change your address, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, is your income X, and do you have net assets of, I forgot what the number was, it was a big number, it was $10 million or $50 million. And if you don't have that, you cannot participate in the following investments. You are unaccredited, and by law, you're not allowed to buy this, that, or the other thing. And I got furious. I said, I'm a sophisticated investor. I understand the stuff. I may not reach that accredited level of having $20 million in my account, but I'm a citizen who makes my own decisions, but wisely, and you can't do it. That sort of stuff disappears because the tokenization does not require that at all. It doesn't get rid of the stock exchange. It takes those pieces of paper that say you own 1,000 shares of something, and allows that piece of paper to end up in an NFT sitting on a blockchain for which you have the password to. It is less onerous, it is easier to transfer, it is easier to take custody of. The middlemen, you worked in the stock exchanges, you know how many middlemen are in there. There are, particularly in issuances, there are the issuer, and there are the custodians, and there are the registrars, and there are the commission salesmen. Everybody's taking a little piece out of this thing. So there's a thick piece of commissioned middleman that gets taken out. On the blockchain with this tokenization stuff, it's squashed to about 1,000th the side and takes place at about 1,000th the speed. 1,000 times the speed. Now, you can do a big issuance of a $500 million note in a day or two compared to the 3 or 4 months that it would take in the traditional old system. Real-world asset tokenization, I'm sorry for that terrible word, but that's the one that's become embedded in the literature. Real-world RWA tokenization is is probably will probably be the most profound change in finance since electronic banking. And this is not me as an enthusiast speaking. These are the big research institutions like Boston Consulting Group and JP Morgan and the others. And it is the killer use case for this whole blockchain story, much more so than the cryptocurrencies that we were talking about earlier.
So then the question becomes, this state, any state, is going to lose the most important weapon in the armory, which is the control of their own economy with their own fiat currency.
Yes, so let's talk about the state and what they are doing to fight back, besides trying to ban it, which hasn't worked anywhere. I think it's banned in Egypt and Algeria, but nowhere else. The state is fighting back from a number of perspectives. The most important one is saying, if you can't beat him, join him. So we're going to issue a cryptocurrency called a central bank digital currency. Now, the danger of a central bank digital currency, one of the dangers, and I'll talk about one of the weaknesses, is that it is a potential means of surveillance, Mike. So in China, the CBDC, which is now being rolled out, it's called the E1, is used to track your every purchase. And if you purchase one, bottle of whiskey too much, well, no, you can't go into a liquor store for the next 6 months of punishment. If you jaywalk, then you're not allowed on public transport. And this is actually happening. There are recorded cases. America and Britain and Holland and Switzerland and all those supposedly nice companies are saying, no, when our CBDC comes out, we would never try to surveil your individual purposes. Well, that's very nice under the government that currently exists, but what about the next government? So CBDCs are terrifying because they are not anonymous. They use all the lovely blockchain stuff, which is security and the ease of transfer and the certainty of ownership and all those words that you hear. But they're not anonymous, so the state can watch your every purchase. Right now, the state can watch our every purchase, except for cash. They don't know what we're spending our money on. And the banks only have to report to the state when it gets to certain amounts. They don't have to report everything. If it's over 10,000 Rand deposit, the bank has to make a report. So nation states are fighting back using CBDCs. But I don't want to sound like the sort of enthusiast that wants to uncritically look at this thing and say, that's all nonsense. Because in actual fact, the state needs to control its economy. It needs to build roads. It needs to finance hospitals and fire departments and police departments. And if it cannot see money flowing through the economy, it does not have a handle on how to control that economy. The state has to collect taxes, and people can cheat on their taxes. The state can't put money in the fiscus, which is not to say that South Africans don't cheat on their taxes. They do. We have a terrible tax collection system. So they're saying all of this cryptocurrency threatens my ability to wisely control this economy. And all the citizens in some countries are saying, you never wisely controlled your economy, and we're going to have a parallel system. And as I said before, there's a great amount of tension and fighting in this thing. The most advanced document I've seen that addresses these philosophical issues between state and individual is a piece of consultation. It was a white paper that was developed by the Law Commission of Wales and UK and Wales, which is a body which is retained by the English Parliament to give them white paper in feed on any policy matter. They said to these guys, there's this thing called crypto, and we don't know how to handle this. We don't know how to regulate it. Please go find out what it's all about and write a white paper. And I read all 120 pages of that white paper. And what they said is we have two forms of ownership throughout history. One is called assets at rest and one is called assets in motion. Assets at rest is this table and the money in your pocket in your house. And assets in motion is a loan because it's time-based. So it's not really an asset until the term is finished. This thing called crypto is something else called a digital asset, and it doesn't fit into any of the legislation for assets at rest, assets at motion, and we have to build an entire new legislative system. Now, Mike, I don't know how long this will take, but there is a difference with this crypto thing that didn't exist before 2009, and people are grappling with how to deal with it.
Now, Stephen, the idea is partially exciting, partially terrifying.
Yeah.
There are probably people that are watching this that think it's a great idea to not have government, especially the South African experience. It feels like a step forward. But I don't think we really fully grasp what government does even bad governments.
I'm on your side of this particular question, absolutely.
You know, so play it forward. What happens, in your opinion, 10 years, 20 years out? Should the best case scenario, should we weed out? I mean, I love the way you say weed out, as if there's only 5 bad apples and we just have to weed them out.
It's a gene pool cleansing, Mike.
It's a gene pool which will be replaced by a bigger gene pool soon enough. I mean,
Yeah.
you spend a lot of time telling us what's happened in the past, and we know that one bad guy is not alone. There's a new one born every minute. You know, so play it forward. What does a financial system look like if crypto and the blockchain and the whole world change when it reaches that critical mass?
Okay, so now I'm going to sound like Pollyanna here
Yeah.
for a moment, because I'm going to say the following. If I play it forward 10 years, and let's assume that the good guys have gotten better at protecting these assets from bad guys, let's take that off the table as an issue. What you will find is a parallel system between the fiat currency that we know and that has that sits under the control of government surveillance, and a parallel currency that individuals use, which is cryptocurrency, and an accommodation between those sovereign citizens and that states that sits somewhere in the middle, and that's the Pollyannish part of my projections. We already have that to a certain extent because we have cash and barter and favors, which are all 3 of them are outside of government control. This is an extension of that where you have a set of things that have value, which are your own as a citizen, and you can spend them as you like, and you have a government who builds your roads and hospitals and collects the taxes and does all the things that it's supposed to do and stands accountable, hopefully in a democracy, under those conditions, and these things run on parallel rails. And that is that's my fairy story ending to this fight. But there'll always going to be tensions somewhere in the middle where, citizens say there should be no government, which is just dumb. And government says there should be no privacy of valuables, and that's just dumb. And somewhere there must be a political accommodation.
So we shouldn't look at crypto as just a digital tax haven.
Yeah, we shouldn't look at crypto as a digital tax haven. Crypto is, as I said before, the perfect world is where the entire monetary system goes onto blockchain. So it doesn't necessarily become anonymous. So the government has their fiat currency that lives on a blockchain because it's faster and quicker and more secure and all of that stuff. And then there is private money, which we're allowed to use as citizens and use without being surveilled. And a way for the law to be stringent and implementable enough so that you can catch the tax cheats and the other bad guys.
Well, let's hope so. Ladies and gentlemen, if you were confused about crypto, hopefully we've helped, not just crypto, but all these new instruments which are already part of our lives. Perhaps you're not using them yet, but they're out there. It's like a lot of technologies. There's a lot out there. We don't have to use them all, but you've got to know that they are there.
Let me give one final punt over here to your viewers. This book is written for people who know nothing about the subject. It is written in plain English without any jargon. I promise you will understand this world when you get to the last page. It reads like a thriller.
Well, that's fantastic. Let's all rush out and get it, because I think, it is definitely part of the financial mix. We've got a wonderful lot of people that will be watching this, and you need to make sure that you know what's going on, because your future might lie in a mine, which might be in a computer on your desk or on your phone. Professor Stephen Boyke Sidley, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the State of the Nation today. To everybody watching, I hope this helped. Yeah, just drop us a comment. Let us know what you think about this particular conversation, and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you again soon on the State of the Nation.